I'm Liz Watson with the Congressional Progressive Caucus Center. The Congressional Progressive Caucus Center works to bring together leaders from across the progressive movement, grassroots organizations, policy folks, to really drive progressive ideas into the debate and to build the momentum and the cohesion to move those ideas forward, to build a stronger and more cohesive progressive movement. And we know that's exactly what we need in this time. We need to be putting big ideas on the table to solve the crisis we're in. And we're just thrilled to be joined by our partners at MoveOn in this broadcast, as well as Senator Warren and the Fight for 15, Adriana Alvarez representing Fight for 15. I'm going to turn to my co-host, Rahna Epting, now.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Rahna Epting. I'm the Executive Director of MoveOn, and I am honored to be here with all of you and our incredible guests this evening. I stand here humbled to join this call representing millions of MoveOn members all throughout the country who believe that we cannot wait around for those in power to do the right thing, that in fact, we have to make it politically untenable for them to do anything but. MoveOn members believe that if we work together, we can create a country and a democracy that works for all of us, not just the wealthy, not just the privileged, but a world where everyone is set up to thrive, where we take care of one another, where it's rooted in love, rooted in abundance, and a recognition that our fates are tied to one another. And if anything that this crisis and this pandemic has taught us is that we are ultimately connected. So together we're millions strong and we are powerful. We can influence the decisions our leaders make. We can influence the fate of our communities, and we can influence how we recover from this crisis. So I look forward to the conversation we'll have together here tonight with two of our great leaders in the movement to discuss how we will do this together. I'll turn it back to Liz.
Thanks, Rahna. So to say these are tough times is really the understatement of the century. We're losing on average 1 million jobs every single day. And we have folks from so many different sectors who are going out to work every day without protections, without paid sick days, without decent pay and living wages to support their families. And these are problems that we have to solve, that we have the capacity to solve, and they're urgent, and we need to address them right now. We know that Congress has taken a lot of steps forward, that Congress did move to pass the CARES Act, and of course that provided a lifeline for so many in terms of the critical expansion of unemployment insurance and paid sick days for some, and some support for some small businesses. But clearly, there's a lot more that needs to get done, and we know that Congress can do better, and we know that Senator Warren is going to show them how. So thankfully, we have champions who are with us, who are thinking bigger, who are putting the big ideas on the table that can move our country forward. We have champions like Senator Warren. We have champions like the co-chairs of the Progressive Caucus, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, who just this week put a bold proposal on the table for a Paycheck Guarantee Act. And what that would do is make sure that folks can actually stay in their jobs. The government has told people, we're shutting you down, we're shutting down businesses, right? The government needs to figure out how to keep people paid and in their jobs and attached to their health insurance. So that's a big idea we've got on the table now. We saw Congressman Mark Pocan, the other co-chair of the Progressive Caucus, put a big idea on the table around expanding work sharing to make sure that folks whose hours are reduced can still get their paychecks. And tonight we're going to hear some pretty big ideas from Senator Elizabeth Warren, and I'm so excited about that and the Essential Workers Bill of Rights that she's put on the table together with Congressman Ro Khanna. These are the kind of ideas that we need to be putting on the table to make sure that folks have the benefits and protections that they deserve. The progressive movement and the labor movement are bringing up incredible solutions too. We're seeing essential workers like Adriana Alvarez organize sick-outs, right, and brave demonstrations in this time that is so vulnerable for so many to fight for their rights and the rights of so many essential workers across the country. And we're just so proud to be joined by Adriana with the Fight for 15 here tonight to hear about the work she's been leading. So we came into this pandemic with a broken economy and a broken healthcare system. Now we need to fight to fix those systems very fast to provide real relief right now. But it's not enough to just get people the relief they need now. We need to come out of this a stronger and more just nation. And I am so thrilled to be joined by leaders who are going to help us think here tonight about how we're going to do that. Rahna Epting from MoveOn, my co-host, Adriana Alvarez, and the amazing folks with Fight for 15, and Senator Elizabeth Warren. We're so pleased to have you all here with us tonight to talk about the solutions that we need to be putting on the table and the momentum that we need to build behind them. So thank you for joining us.
All right, so we will get started. I am very honored to introduce and incredibly grateful to be joined here tonight by one of the most brilliant, compassionate, generous, visionary leaders of our generation, a woman who is an example of strong leadership and is driving a bold vision for recovery for our country. Every US Senator, every House member, every elected official should take note that this is the kind of leadership we need right now and that we deserve. A bold leadership that isn't afraid to demand direct, immediate, short and long-term relief for the people that need it the most, and recognize the systemic injustices of our system and how do we tackle those once and for all. And that person is Senator Elizabeth Warren. So I'll hand it over to you, Senator.
Oh, thank you so much. That's an incredibly generous introduction, and I appreciate it. And thank you, Rahna. Thank you, Liz. Thanks to MoveOn. Thanks to CPCC and the Fight for 15. And I'm so glad that everyone on this call is going to hear from Adriana soon in Fight for 15 because their advocacy and work is so powerfully important. So we've all started this by talking about what an extraordinary, unprecedented, challenging, difficult time this is for our country as we're fighting the COVID-19 pandemic. And I hope everyone who's on this call is taking care of themselves and taking care of each other. You know, too many families were already struggling to stay afloat before this pandemic. And we have to keep people safe and whole during this time and doing it in a way that fortifies our public programs so that families don't have to live crisis to crisis. Now, as all of you on this call know, Congress is already working on a fourth stimulus package. I put out a list of priorities last week in a New York Times op-ed, and I just want to share a couple of them with you to get started. First, we need to tackle the public health crisis head on. And it means we need to dramatically expand COVID-19 testing and use our public programs to provide health care for free for everyone who doesn't otherwise have it. You know, this virus is hitting communities of color the hardest. That means we need to address the racial gaps in both testing and care. I'm going to keep pushing on this to make sure that agencies are tracking and reporting these disparities. We're not only in a healthcare crisis, we're in the middle now of an economic crisis. So I'm focused in part on what we need to do to keep families afloat, not just in this pandemic, but also as we start to rebuild this economy when the pandemic passes. You know, this includes broad student debt cancellation, increasing Social Security benefits, and more resources for child care providers. We need to crack down on the predatory behavior by big companies that want to use this crisis to make a quick buck or to gobble up their competitors. And as we've already talked about on this call already, we need to find ways to keep workers on payroll, even if those workers have to stay home. For me, it is key that any money that goes to big business from the federal government needs strings attached and strong oversight from independent watchdogs. So that's kind of the big structure for me, but I thought what I'd do tonight is take a little extra time to tell you about my plan for essential workers. So these are the workers who are still going to work every day, the ones who can't telework, workers who range from nurses and people in healthcare to bus drivers to grocery clerks and warehouse workers and delivery people. These workers often don't have appropriate equipment, appropriate safety standards, or appropriate job protection. Our nation has a duty to take care of them while they are taking care of us. So today, Congressman Rahna and I released an Essential Workers Bill of Rights. And we see this, it's just a list of their rights, protections, and benefits that all essential workers should be guaranteed right now and must be included in the text of the next stimulus package. The first right is health and safety protections. We have nurses who are wearing garbage bags because there's not enough personal protective equipment. We have workers who interact with people all day long who aren't being provided masks or gloves. This is shameful and it needs to end. Essential workers need a guarantee that they will have the equipment and the safety standards that they need to do their jobs safely. The list also includes premium pay. All workers deserve a living wage, and essential workers must get robust additional compensation on top of that, retroactive to the start date of the pandemic. If they're going to get out under such dangerous conditions, then they ought to be getting hazardous duty pay. Workers also need guaranteed paid sick leave and paid family and medical leave, no red tape and no exceptions. And they need health care, regardless of their insurance or their immigration status. Again, if they're going to put their lives on the line, this is the minimum we can guarantee. We also need to use this as an opportunity to end worker misclassification so that companies like Uber and Instacart can't deny basic labor protections to gig workers who are trying to help us stay fed in our homes. We need to make a part of the basic rights the obligation to protect workers' right to organize and to protect them if they need to act as a whistleblower when they witness unsafe conditions. And let's be clear on this one. We've got to keep holding companies responsible for their obligations to their workers. If these companies get taxpayer dollars, then they need to put workers on their board of directors and face big penalties if they break their word on worker protections. For me, this is about basic accountability. And finally, we need essential workers, unions, and worker organizations at the table designing our safety standards and response. This is every place from individual work sites to the White House Coronavirus Task Force. Workers see firsthand where the needs are and where the gaps are, and they should be helping develop the solutions. For me, this is about both basic fairness, but also essential. These are people we need right now in order to keep our healthcare system going and in order to keep our economy going, so that everyone else who can stay home because they are there to make sure that we can still get food and essential services. We must make sure that essential workers get these rights and guaranteed in the next stimulus package. Last thing I want to say before I answer some of your questions is I want to make a brief mention about our elections, because 2020 matters more now than ever. I just put out a plan for how we keep our elections running smoothly during a pandemic. And that is absolutely critical. We cannot force voters into a position where they have to choose between risking their health and getting a chance to vote. And we also cannot be in a position where Donald Trump or Republicans want to cancel or delay the November election. So this is really critical that we get basic protections in, vote by mail available to every registered voter in America. We still want to keep same-day voting available for those who want to do it, but it's important that we have a vote from home option that truly works. So we've got to protect our democracy. So those are just the highlights for me. Making sure that we win this fight is up to everyone. And I know that all of you are advocating for Congress to protect Americans and to keep families safe during this crisis. I want to thank you for your work, and I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has.
Thank you so much, Senator. We have one question prepared, and then we will take some questions from the audience. But
Sure.
The first question is, you spoke about many folks that are impacted in this crisis that were left out of the CARES Act, the last package that Congress passed. So immigrant families, college students, gig workers, other essential workers, and small businesses. And we also haven't yet addressed protecting our elections. For folks that are sitting home right now, practicing social distancing, as we all should, or physical distancing, and keeping ourselves and our families safe, but we're not able to go meet with our member of Congress in their district office, what can we do to make sure Congress is prioritizing bold legislation from here on out that provides direct relief that you've talked about? How can we make sure our voices are heard in this moment?
So it is a great question, and I appreciate your asking it. You know, for me, I mean, this is our moment. We may all have to stay home, but it doesn't mean we have to stay quiet. This is your chance. And this is why we're all connected now through our laptops, through our telephones. We need to be getting in touch with our members of Congress. We need to be getting in touch, by the way, with our governors and our state legislators. We need to be turning the heat up on everyone. You know, every time, I should add this, although my focus is always at the federal level, trying to hold the federal government accountable. The federal government has a critically important role to play right now. But every time a state steps up, it helps some people and it helps set the example. So stay on everybody and stay connected to each other. That is also a critical part of how we make our voices heard. I think it's absolutely essential. Can I also say, because I think you had it in your question, I am very worried about the fact that the CARES Act left out many people, including immigrant families, including many college students, a lot of gig workers and contract workers and restaurant workers are struggling to access the benefits that were outlined in the CARES Act. We've got to keep demanding that everyone is included. And this means every time you see a proposal or a piece of legislation or someone's putting forth an idea, ask, who isn't included here? Ask, how is this proposal defining worker or American? Are undocumented Americans included? Are domestic workers included? Are low-income people included? How does this account for Americans with disabilities? You know, what we've seen with the Families First Act and the CARES Act implementation is that the Trump administration, frankly, is just getting too much flexibility to decide what people to leave out. And if we don't raise hell about that, lots of people who need help right now won't get it. So, for example, we know that some college students and immigrant families were specifically included from the recovery rebate. The Trump administration also decided it wouldn't send these benefits automatically to Social Security recipients. Now, Democrats called them out, demanded change, and the Treasury Department reversed their decision within a day. So to me, it makes it clear we need to be more explicit in the statutes and not leave so much flexibility for the Trump administration. But it also says this is the time to be vigilant at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end to make sure that everyone gets included.
And we can show a slide right now. I just want to say a way that you can make sure your voice is heard is you can pick up your phone and you can call your member of Congress, your representative right now. And there are many things that Senator Warren talked about that we should be demanding in this moment, whether that's protecting our elections, protecting the United States Postal Service. I saw that in the chat. But we're suggesting let's all make sure we call our representative at 833-933-0194 and demand that we pass an Essential Workers Bill of Rights and a Paycheck Guarantee Act. Those are two essential reforms that we can pass right now that will provide direct relief to those who need it most. And we'll put that number up again later on in the call, but I'm going to hand it to Liz, who has a question from folks participating over the live stream.
Well, Senator Warren, thank you so much for your leadership, and we're also grateful for the fact that we have you fighting for all of us and for people to really be centered in frontline communities in this recovery. So a question I have for you really goes to the work that you have been doing for a long time around corporate accountability and making sure that we are ensuring that when taxpayer dollars go to companies, they come with strong conditions to keep workers on payrolls, to make sure they're not wasted on CEO bonuses and stock buybacks and more. And you went into this some in your remarks, but I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more, and we got plenty of questions from our audience about this, about what we can do to make sure that taxpayer dollars are well spent and to hold corporations accountable.
So it's a great question because I have been worried about this from the beginning, as you rightly identify, that we're just going to create a huge slush fund for Donald Trump and his administration to spend however they want to spend it. I'm fighting tooth and nail in Washington to make sure that we don't repeat the failures of the last crisis when bankers got huge bailouts and people who lost everything got nothing. So before the last stimulus package, when I released a set of bailout conditions for any big company getting taxpayer dollars, it at least moved the conversation. Mitch McConnell had originally introduced a bill with no strings for any corporate bailouts. He held firm to that until the last few days of negotiations. Democrats fought him on it, and we got a better bill. And my office has already begun conducting vigorous oversight of that $450 billion slush fund, and we're going to stay in it for the long haul. Two things I want to point out about this, because I'm going to need the help of everybody on this call to lift this up as information comes out. The two things we got in this is that we got a congressional oversight panel independent of the administration. The person has already been named on the Senate side. On the Democratic side, Bharat Ramamurthy, he's really good. He knows what he's doing here. The others have not yet been named. As soon as they're named, that panel can start working. And we'll see what reports they put out, what they're able to bring forward and lift up the work they did. The second thing I want to mention is that something we got into the bill is that every time the government gives out money from the slush fund, it has got to publicly post the contract. So you can see exactly how much money went out, who it went to, and what the terms were, and it must be posted within 14 days of the time that the contract is signed. Everyone who applies and is turned down, also that has to be publicly posted. Who asked for money, how much they asked for, and why they were turned down. That's going to give us a lens into everything they're doing. So I put it on your radar screen now. Obviously, we don't have anything yet. But if we're really active in oversight from the very first, when we get the first information from the Congressional Oversight Panel, when we get the first information about the contracts that have been signed, if we're aggressive about that, I think it's going to make a difference in the subsequent loans and give us some oversight that is meaningful, not just after the fact, but has some influence on how this money gets spent going forward.
Thank you. We have another question from Brenda, who is on the call, and she asks, what happens if Trump does declare businesses reopened? Does the aid to states stop? Do programs end? Will people be forced to return to work even if they don't agree with Trump that it's safe? Will people lose their right to unemployment benefits? Tell us, what can we expect if this happens?
Right. So, Brenda, that is a really good question. And thank you for asking this. People need to start asking about this. You know, we need to take care of people right now, but we need to do it in a way that makes structural changes so that families no longer have to live crisis to crisis. The only way to ensure that it is safe for people to go back to work is to follow the advice of public health experts. They are the ones who should be critical in this decision, not Donald Trump, and people who are only looking to their political futures. The expanded unemployment insurance that Congress passed is so important. But that extra money on top of every benefit check, and that actually will get people close to 100% of wage replacement for the median worker in America. But that money is only in effect until August. Now, the good news is, no matter what Donald Trump does between now and then, it will be in effect until August. The bad news is, it's only in effect until August. Now, my colleagues in the Senate and I know that people's economic insecurity won't end on the same day as the pandemic. So we're already fighting to provide additional economic relief to families. And that is an important part, and we're going to continue to do that. So help us do that. But part of your question, Brenda, is also about safety. This is how I see it. How we fight for essential workers right now is going to set up the fight for safety for every worker. The point about protective equipment, the point about protecting the whistleblowers if they're forced into unsafe conditions. Every part of what we're arguing for our workers right now, for essential workers, lays a foundation for all of our workers when this pandemic is over. So if you needed another reason to fight for Congressman Khanna's and my Essential Workers Bill of Rights, there's one. When we are fighting to make sure that frontline workers are getting the protective equipment they need and workplace standards are set up to keep them safe, then it's going to create standards that benefit everyone when they go back to work. And then one more piece of it I want to mention, and that is, again, triple underline the importance of testing. You know, we talk about how there are thousands more tests available. We don't need thousands more tests. We literally need tens of millions of tests available. And we're going to have to do a lot of repeat testing, including testing on people who have no active symptoms. That means we've got to have the test kits. We've got to have people who are trained to do it. We're going to need to be testing both for active infection and for antibodies to know who's already had it and to be tracking how long will they be safe for and how they can re-enter the workforce and stop social distancing. Testing is going to be key to this because without testing, our public health officials can't have the information they need to make informed decisions that keep us all safe. So for me, those are kind of the key parts of it, making sure that our economic packages extend long enough, making sure that we get protection for our workers, and making sure that we're getting enough testing that we can make sensible decisions about when it is safe for us to reduce or to end social distancing. And thanks for the question, Brenda. Really good.
Thank you so much, Senator Warren. I know you have to run. You're doing incredible work for all of us to push the Senate and Congress to do all that you've talked about tonight. So wanted to thank you and everyone on behalf of everyone on the call, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Senator Warren.
Thank you, and thank everybody who's on this call. You know, you are the strength of this movement. And it's your willingness to make those phone calls and to send those emails, to stay in touch with each other, to build our movement, to give it energy, to put wind in our sails. That's how it is, that we're not only going to get through this, we're going to build a stronger, better country on the other side, and we're going to do this together. So thank you all so much for being on the call. Thank you for having me here tonight.
Thank you. And speaking of the folks that we're going to do this together with, I want to introduce Adriana Alvarez, who is a 27-year-old single mother from Cicero, Illinois. It's a suburb of Chicago. And Adriana has been a crew member at McDonald's for 9 years and a leader in the Fight for 15 and a union for 6 years. So a lot of us have friends and family members or have heard of the Fight for 15 campaign. And Adriana is one of the leaders in Illinois. We're so proud to have her here. Her son is Manny, he's 8 years old. And I'll say a bit about Adriana before I turn it over. Before the coronavirus pandemic, she was struggling to make ends meet without a living wage. The economic effects of the pandemic are squeezing Adriana and her fellow Fight for 15 leaders hard. Her hours fluctuate from week to week as operations in her store change. And she's continuing to fight for better working conditions, even in the midst of all of this. She's helped workers in her store get several raises through her organizing efforts. And in mid-March, before many workers were worrying about how the virus would affect them, Adriana led a store-wide walkout demanding clarity on the store's paid sick leave policies and processes. One of her fellow workers had not been paid sick days since November of 2019. Since November of 2019. Adriana delivered a petition bearing the signatures of nearly 24 of her workers to her manager, and she led a rally outside of her store. And a few days later, management created a clear process for how paid sick days could be requested. Her work has been featured in the New Republic, CBS News, and more. And I am so honored, we are so honored to have you here, Adriana. Thank you for taking time out of your evening. I know you're busy. Can you tell us a bit about your experience right now in this moment where we're all dealing with the economic and health impacts of the coronavirus pandemic?
Sure, thank you so much. I want to start off by saying thank you guys to MoveOn, to the Congressional Progressive Caucus Center, and of course, Senator Warren. It's such a privilege to be on this call. As you said, I do work for McDonald's, and you know, they keep saying that we're essential workers, but they're not showing it. They're treating us like we're disposable. We're still getting paid poverty wages. Like you said, my hours fluctuate. We're risking our lives going into work, and we're still getting paid poverty wages. I think it's highly unfair. You know, these big corporations make so much money, and they don't reward us with anything. You know, I used to be able to count on 5 days a week of work. A couple weeks ago, I only had 2 days of work. I am a single mom. I do have an 8-year-old boy, and that was the first week where the schools were shut down. So I took it as, you know, it's fine. I get to watch him from Monday through Friday, and I'll just work Sunday and Saturday. But then my paycheck hit last week, Monday. It was a low blow. I don't even want to think about it because that's how low it was. It's just ridiculous how, you know, everything that's going on, and these corporations just can't get it together. We barely got masks a couple of days ago. We have to wash them and make sure that they're dried by the next time that we use them because there's a shortage of masks. But you know what? We feel pressured. Either we go to work sick or we don't get paid. So it's hard to juggle that decision, especially having families and stuff like that. But you know, we're not staying silent about what's going on in our stores. You know, across the country, workers have been leading strikes with other fast food workers, demanding our employers take responsibility and that they take appropriate steps to ensure that we're safe. Just last week, you know, hundreds of workers in California went on strike after workers tested positive for COVID-19, and they failed to let them know. So what happened? People are going to take action. They're not going to risk their lives for poverty wages. So before them, you know, workers in Durham and St. Louis walked off the job, demanding PPE and protesting McDonald's massive mishandling of the situation. You know what? It's not a surprise, but it's ridiculous. This is serious. You know, it's a matter of life and death, and we essential workers are the ones on the front lines, and we're not getting paid enough. Our demands for McDonald's are pretty simple. You know, we need PPE, we need masks, we need gloves, sanitizers, barriers for workers who have contact with the people. You know, we need paid sick leave for our workers. Like you mentioned, we had to fight for ours, even though it's a law. And, you know, luckily we got it right before this whole thing hit. Hazard pay, so that workers can get an additional hourly premium above their regular pay. Compensation for lost hours. I only worked 2 days a couple weeks ago. That's ridiculous. We need quarantine pay for those of us who have the virus or who have to take care of, you know, immediate family workers. This is something that big corporations, especially just like McDonald's, can do if they really wanted to. Starbucks has given their workers 30 days off, whether they come to work or not. If Starbucks can do it, you really think McDonald's can do it? They're the second largest private employer. They can do it. They just choose not to, and it's really frustrating. And, you know, when we have moments like this, it's like, it goes to show why I've been fighting for 15 and a union for the past 6 years. Moments like these reiterate why we need a union. We shouldn't have to be fighting for basic rights. A union would definitely be there to protect us. It would have a voice in the workplace. And by joining together, we can make sure that every McDonald's worker wins higher pay, so we don't have to make impossible choices between taking a sick day and supporting our family. By having a voice on the job, we can advocate for our families, our healthcare, and our futures, not just during a pandemic. And it's ridiculous that I had to come to this, but, you know, all the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana. Liz has another question for you, but before we go to that question, like, you're fighting so hard for your workplace, and we want to fight for you too. And so for folks that are listening on the call, I want to remind everyone that one of the most important things you can do right now from home is to call your representative and to demand that they pass the Essential Workers Bill of Rights to support and show up in solidarity for folks like Adriana, who are working day in and day out without the essential protections they deserve, and to pass a Paycheck Guarantee Act, which ensures that people can stay on the payroll and not be laid off in this moment and get paid, even if their employer isn't asking them to come into work. So please call your representative tonight or in the morning, 833-933-0194. It is critical, and we need all of you to do that. So then I'll turn it over to Liz, who has some more questions for you.
Adriana, thank you so much for your leadership, and thank you to your colleagues and coworkers in Fight for 15 for the incredible work that you all are doing. You know, when you really step back and think about how you all stuck your necks out in this very, very difficult and risky moment, right, to fight for what's right, to fight for paid sick days, to fight to make sure that you had the protective gear so that you and your coworkers don't get sick. It is just inspiring and awesome that folks are out there taking this risk. And I do think we are living through a moment where, you know, the Fight for 15 has been saying for a very long time, it is not okay that people who are working in service jobs are earning poverty wages. It's not okay that basic protections aren't there, and it's not okay that companies routinely fight having a union. And so I think there's a moment where you are being heard, and I am, excited that as you all go out there and you strike and you demonstrate and you have your sick outs and walkouts, I think people are waking up in this moment to the essential work that essential workers do. And so my question for you is, how do we seize this window of opportunity where the blinders have come off and people are seeing more clearly how important your work is and the protections that you need? What are the things that you think we ought to be saying to Congress in this moment that essential workers absolutely cannot live without?
I'm glad that, it's finally, people are finally seeing, the work that we do is not just, oh, you're just a burger flipper and stuff like that. I'm upset that it had to take something so big as a pandemic for them to see it. Yes. But all in all, I'm glad that, people are actually realizing the work that we do. And I think, we need a plan like Senator Warren that would include all working people like me, that like what we need to do to get it through this crisis. They should definitely support providing fully funded, accessible healthcare for every worker, including, 100% paid testing and treatment for this COVID-19 that popped out of nowhere. They should definitely make employers like McDonald's provide sufficient personal protective equipment so that we can do our job safely. And they should cover medical costs of workers and immediate family members who test positive for COVID-19. This should apply to anyone who wears a McDonald's uniform. That doesn't include just, corporate, because they like to say, oh yeah, only corporate stores are covered. But what about us, the franchisee workers? We still wear the McDonald's uniform. We're still doing the same work, being pushed the same way as corporate. So I don't see why we should be treated any different. They should definitely provide every worker immediate access to 12 weeks leave at full pay if they are sick. If we're mandated to stay home, or if they have to take care for loved ones, if my son gets sick, God forbid, or, stuff like that. They should make sure that all workers on the job right now earn a living wage, and have something, reimbursed wages if we're not getting enough hours, and guarantee easily access emergency childcare, debt relief, and housing assistance. I mean, this is all something that we need to be protected, and we need to make sure that it's provided for everyone.
Thank you, Adriana. I have one more audience question, and unless you have one you want to ask, Rahna.
No, go ahead. I think that's good.
Adriana, again, thank you so much for your leadership and for fighting together with your coworkers for what's right in this really just trying time for everyone. One of the questions from an audience member was, what are you doing at the Fight for 15 to make sure that we're including all workers in this fight, that we're including people who may be undocumented, that we're making sure, we know the coronavirus does not discriminate, and we can't discriminate either. How are we making sure that our fight is as inclusive as it can be of all people?
Well, I think at the 515, we're like the COVID-19, we don't discriminate either. We try and help out everyone. Definitely, I know a lot of my coworkers are especially worried for, a lot of reasons, but the 515 has everybody's back. I know that. I've seen it myself. I've witnessed it. I've helped. It's whatever we can do. We're not going to leave anybody behind. That's for sure.
Well, we're so thankful for your leadership and thankful to all of you here tonight who joined this call. I will just, echo what you heard from Rahna. the leadership of Fight for 15, the leadership of our progressive champions in Congress, of Senator Warren, and the leadership of the folks on the phone, right, who took time out of their day to show up here tonight to make sure that you're listening to what's happening, that you're calling your members of Congress, that you're understanding what's going on for folks out there every single day who are risking their lives to feed the rest of us and to earn a paycheck, and it's not okay. It's absolutely not okay that we don't have essential workers' backs, and we all are here tonight to commit to changing that. I think this is probably a good time to show that slide again. So if my folks want to put on the slide about how to call your members of Congress, there you go. We need to pass an Essential Workers Bill of Rights, don't we, Adriana? Yeah. And a Paycheck Guarantee Act to make sure that we staunch the 1 million layoffs that are happening right now every single day. One thing the coronavirus has shown us is that we're all in this together, and we all have to fight together. And we know that when we fight hard and when we put it all on the line, we can win together. So I want to turn to my colleague Rahna Epting to close us out, and I want to thank all of you deeply for joining us here tonight for Dispatch from the Front Lines, and we'll be back with you next week. So I'll turn to Rahna.
Thank you, everyone. I just want to close us out with reminding us what energizes us, keeps us resilient and moving forward in this moment. Everyone is struggling through this pandemic in different ways, and it's impacting our communities in very different ways. None of it great, all of it pretty tough. But what gives me hope is all of you that have joined us on this live stream tonight, leaders like Adriana, leaders like Senator Warren, and the millions of people we know are out there in this country that are showing up for each other and taking care of one another through this. And while we can't depend on the person who lives on Pennsylvania Avenue to take care of us in this moment, we can do all we can to fight for what we know we need, to work with our allies in Congress and elected officials at the state and local level, and make the change and get through this the best way that we can, which means together in love and rooted in dignity and resiliency. So thank you so much. And I hope you have a great evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you all, and have a wonderful night.